Hi, I'm Len, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain what anti-academics is. What's the first thing that should come out of your mouth if an academic person says, "Do you have a degree?" And you have to think of something fast, like, "The real degree is in here." People need something to verbally hitch onto so they can go like this. A whole conversation could be made of just hitches. If your friend thinks they're asking a harmless question, when in reality you're having to defend yourself against an unprovoked suggestion of slavery and debt. It's like trying to explain the movie Full Metal Jacket, which isn't about the horrors of war, but the horrors of boot camp. A guy who's an average, well-adjusted civilian is mentally destroyed by an eccentric drill sergeant. The entire unit ties him down and beats him up. He ends up shooting himself and the sergeant. So it's an example of a socially acceptable form of destruction. The actor was made an actual drill sergeant despite the warnings of the movie. So I could say an anti-academic is someone who does the work no academic knows about, helping discarded and hopeless students behind the scenes to save lives and livelihoods. Or I could say teachers are categorically unhappy, that disciplinarians tend to be people who have been unsuccessful in relationships. When married couples are forced to choose between two different careers, the teacher is often considered to be the one who settles. But I've thought of another one. The movie Good Will Hunting is an anti-academic film people can recall instantly instead of having to explain that there's no intellectual difference between an overachiever and an underachiever. I have long been curious about student overachievers, the valedictorian, the class president, who represent the elite upper class in the very subjective class system of privileged and underprivileged students. If prodigious students are so smart, why am I a philosopher and they're not? Why do they only jump through the hoops assigned to them? Why not say to the teacher, "I'd like to trade in some of my scores so the whole class can graduate together and we can all be brothers"? Where is the next Karl Marx? If someone's knowledge exceeds that of their teacher, isn't it natural human behavior to think of other people as insects rather than continue to do what you're told? Now, there are things I'm very passionate about learning. I want to be the best. There's a feeling of belonging. And I didn't understand at the time some people would like to spend their entire life in school. But here's the problem. My friend was both high school and college valedictorian and one of the smartest people I know. And we were discussing how Stanford and other Ivy League schools taking bribes undermines everything she believes about the school system. And she had no answer. It's like knowing someone who grew up in a perfect family and asking, where's the sibling rivalry? The power struggle between parents and adolescents that's completely natural. Could it be they're so blessed they don't know about it? Which gets into success versus productivity. I knew a family where the father was a member of the school board, the mother was a disciplinarian math teacher, and the son had all these superlatives that were unusual for a freshman and was constantly challenging our first chair clarinet, who was a senior wanting to graduate first chair, challenging her as a freshman. I don't envy him. I'm sure the pressure was extremely difficult. If I was in his place, I would have challenged the parents in the interests of my own survival, not to mention for the common good, by saying, but you don't have to be productive to be successful. It can just be given to you. Or, how can I earn better treatment for myself? When parents find out they're having 3 generations on the honor roll is in your hands, they either A, beat you, B, the family is destroyed, or C, concede to your demands. Graduation, on the other hand, is like turning a page on a book that will never be opened again. It goes on regardless of how many students died by suicide. It's expected of us as if it were as automatic as breathing. In theory, someone could just go through the motions without having a life or their own answers to anything. So why isn't it fair for me to say, reading Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs, or The Destructors by Graham Greene, both about delinquents, makes you think? The number of people who grow to adulthood without questioning the world around them doesn't make you think, because it's like the gauntlet we had to survive doesn't exist. Let's use the empirical method. What is the yin and the yang of being an overachiever in a family where you're underprivileged? I'll give you a classic argument from the medical field I call ones and zeros. Until recently, an expert in any medical subject was expected to be thin, while heavier people are only the recipients of this knowledge, because in our culture, only ones study zeros, even though mentally they're the same, with the same capabilities to write textbooks on whatever they wish. The military has a class system, officers and enlisted men, that goes back to the feudal system instead of a ladder that goes from private to general. The same is true of academics. It's not a system where the person with the most facts wins. I haven't yet reached a place where I could go back in time and help myself with what I know now. The odds stacked against a self-defining student are just too great. But I think it can be done. I recently got to attend an event where Virginia's First Lady was speaking to the prestigious Virginia Garden Club at a museum I used to work for. The museum was torn down last year to make room for a swimming pool. The curator and I found what's left of it on a woodpile. And a magnolia tree planted in 1840 that was on a list of 100 historic trees of Virginia was cut down by a groundskeeper. The theme of this event was restoring Virginia's public gardens, and the First Lady wrapped up her speech with the Greek proverb, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never rest." She came and went without knowing about the magnolia tree or the history of the property. To me, education is like that dead tree. I scraped the roots, I picked at the bark to see if it was still alive, and nobody cares. I did conduct a little experiment where I mentioned anti-academics in a post in my field of wildlife conservation to see what would happen. I'll be honest, I didn't recruit any acolytes. What I did get was a lot of agreement on specific points without drawing any philosophy you can name, and some valid disagreements. But what happened was, an academic came after me to their own undoing. Not because I'm a target, they just choose their battles frivolously. I've seen experts call in the cavalry to support their conclusions. That's something you can take pride in knowing. But I've never seen someone call in their friends to have a contribution removed, because then they have to eat their words if they're wrong. So instead of engaging this person, I posted in a public forum and ended up with a bigger cavalry to support a contribution where I was correct, but is of no scientific importance and was not worth disputing. Now, someone will say academics isn't necessarily the cause, but I know it well enough to point out how it's the cause. And that is, it leads people to think life is just about memorizing facts and repeating them. And if you do that, you've chosen an easy path. This leaves them completely unprepared for anything that might come out of an unknown corner. I only ask them to respond because I've already prepared for what they're going to say. So, can a person who is the subject of a social experiment study the person who's doing the experimenting? If I've lubricated your brain, feel free to post whatever you wish. Thanks for watching.